You're listening to the Practicing Law Librarian. This limited series is part of PLI's Ever Current podcast, where we bring you insights and updates from legal thought leaders. Find additional episodes at pli.edu or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Karen Osterly. Welcome to the Practicing Law Librarian podcast, presented by PLI's Legal Information Services Group. This podcast brings you conversations with and for the law librarian community. As a practicing law librarian myself, I've been working in legal information services for 34 years, currently with PLI's Library Relations Group. And with me today is Cornell Winston. Cornell Winston is the Law Librarian Record Center Supervisor for the United States Attorney's Office, Central District of California. Cornell has over 35 years' experience in libraries, including both law school and law firm experience. Cornell is active in the American Association of Law Libraries and is their incoming Vice President, President-elect. He formerly served as AALL Treasurer, was a member of the Executive Board and numerous other committees, is a former chair of the AALL Black Caucus, and a former president of the Southern California Association of Law Librarians. Cornell is a graduate of the University of California, Irvine, and Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena. You'll enjoy the 11th Commandment he applies to every class or presentation he leads, and our discussion about the enormous increase in the complexity and breadth of legal research today. He's been married to his wife Cynthia for 33 years and has 2 adult daughters and 2 granddaughters. To read his full bio, please see our podcast page. Thank you for joining us, Cornell.
Thank you for inviting me. There's one thing that I must do that's a requirement for my agency. I have to say the opinions, thoughts expressed are my own. They don't reflect those of the Department of Justice or the Central District of California. So everything that comes out of my mouth is I'm going to have to own it and not my employer.
Okay. So I wanted to ask about your work, your background, and how you got to your current role.
Gosh, how did I come to this? I always say I came to law librarianship in the back door. And I came through the back door, and there's a whole lot of people opened up doors for me to get to where I am. I've been at the U.S. Attorney's Office here almost 22 years. Before that, I was 10 years at Orrick, Harrington, and Sutcliffe in the LA office. And before that, at Munger, Tolles, and Olson, law firm here in LA. And before that, I was at Whittier Law School. And as an undergrad, I worked as a student worker at the medical library at Harbor-UCLA Medical Center, which is a large county teaching facility in Torrance here in the Southern California area. So I really backed into the door because it was just a job to help get me through college. But I came to really enjoy what I was doing, and I had the librarians there kind of give me some on-the-job training. So a long route to where I am today.
Well, what made you move from law firms to the government?
Well, 2 things. Number one, and it didn't happen, gratefully, I wasn't sure that the LA office was going to stay open. And so, there are a lot of lawyers, there are a lot of legal secretaries, there are a lot of legal paralegals. There are not as many librarians. And, I married 2 wonderful children, and I said, I have to make sure I have a job. And when the job came open, I enjoyed Orrick. Like I said, I was there for 10 years. And, I said, well, I wasn't sure the office and just the chance, just the opportunity to try something new. And so I jumped at the chance, and they offered me the job. And I did have a 5-year plan, 5 to 7 year plan to stay at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I always like to say, I'm about to celebrate my 17th anniversary of my 5-year plan.
There we go. Well, obviously it was a good fit, and you've liked it, and they've treated you well, and you're still there.
Yes, so I love it. I love it.
Good. Excellent. So I'm wondering how your interest in law librarianship developed. You worked undergrad in the library, and then you were at Whittier. But becoming a law librarian, that's kind of a jump.
Well, again, back door.
Okay.
Back door. I really wanted to teach on the college level. But I had to, unfortunately, my parents were rich in love. They were rich in support. they were not rich in money. So I had to work to put my way through school. And I'm grateful I didn't take out all those loans as some of us have had to do. But for a while, I worked for like a year and a half, or a little over a year, as a substitute in a small school district near the college. And I was fine with that until somehow it didn't dawn on my lightning fast mind that summertime school is closed and you need a job. I had money, I had bills, car note, the whole thing. And there was a job opening that was advertised at Whittier Law School. And I only took the job because June, July, and August school is closed, and
you needed something to do.
I needed something to do. And that's literally how I fell in. With law, I will admit, I loved and still love Perry Mason. I just kind of cut my teeth on Perry Mason. And so I ended up, okay, I got a job at Whittier. And again, I fell into it. I loved it. The librarians there were just so gracious. And I ended up staying there a year and a half as the circulation clerk. I was the circulation clerk. But I was determined, because what would happen is I was the circulation clerk, and on the weekends, the librarians weren't there. And so the students would come in and they'd ask a question. And I hated for them to play stump the librarian. And I said, no, you are not going to stump me. And literally, that's how I learned, how I developed my research skills. And after that, I was at Whittier like 2-3 years. And there was an advertisement in the LA Daily Journal for an assistant librarian at Munger Tolles. And what caught my attention was that they said you would have to do loose leaf filing, and they spelled it wrong.
Oh.
Yeah, the newspaper spelled it wrong. I thought Munger had spelled it wrong. And I'm like, okay, this firm cannot be very good if they can't even spell loose leaf. But I applied, and I happened to get an interview. And the librarian there that hired me, Helen Kim, little small, quiet Korean lady who's, she had, during the interview, she said, I've never worked with a man before, but she hired me.
Good.
And as they say, I didn't realize until the day before I went to the interview there at Munger, the firm's reputation. Back then, there were more Supreme Court clerks who worked at Munger. I found out after the fact, as one article in the American Lawyer, I think it was, they said, who's the law firm you call when you have to bet the farm? And I said, you know what? It's interview experience. I'll just go for interview experience. But I got the job.
Yes. And then you found out what a valuable, important firm it was.
Yes.
Terrific.
It literally, Munger, the name Munger, Tolles and Olson helped pave the way, because they have a standard there that is much higher, if I could put it that way, than many places that they demand more, because some of the work that they did, who some of their clients were.
Right. It's critically important.
It's critically important. And you just learned, and I said, no, you have to do well. And that literally paved the way.
Well, that is wonderful. And I'm wondering if that was the start for all the teaching and training that you've done since then.
Yes.
Because you were determined not to be stumped. And so you learned, and then you went to Munger, and you learned and learned and learned, and moved on from there. Because that was one of my next questions. You've done a lot of teaching and a lot of training and a lot of legal research teaching. So can you talk about maybe some of the tools that you created over the years, some of your favorite tools for the teaching and training that you've done?
Well, my number one rule that I have when I teach a class, give a presentation, is I'll call it the 11th Commandment. Thou shalt not be boring. I don't care how much you know. If you can't deliver the information, there is nothing worse as a teacher than somebody falling asleep in one of your classes. And first couple of times you'll say, okay, they stayed out too late. But really, it's like, no, that's on you. So one of the things I try to do is make sure I identify who my audience is, because you're investing your time with me, whether it's a hour class, or if it's, even if it's 15, 20 minutes that I'm teaching here, somebody in the firm how to, do whatever, you're investing your time with me. And that time you cannot get back. And I want to make sure that I give you the best. I'm up on what I do. I want to make sure that you have a proper takeaway from your time. That if I'm teaching you, how to site check, then this is what you're doing. If I'm teaching you how to use Google, some of those advanced features, this is your takeaway, that when you leave my class, it's like, oh, okay, I understand. And that's really what I like.
Yeah, had a particular learning. Can I ask you about PLI and
Sure.
how you may have used it, PLI Plus or the books, whichever format that you might have used in your classes, in your teaching, in your trainings?
I have used the books quite a bit. Some of the things like, okay, I'm showing my age.
No, I came up with the books too.
But, there's some things there in the PLI publications that you could just say, oh, I remember there was one, gosh, now this was out. Let's not put a number on it, but let's just say many years ago, was Managing the Law Library.
Yes, there was a short series.
It was a short series, and at Munger and Orrick, we got the series, and that was really helpful for me because you end up learning to manage on the job, and it's important to, I think, sometimes just to learn from individuals who, as they say, been there, done that, and not try to reinvent the wheel. There's really no good education in reinventing the wheel. We want to make sure that we work smart and not hard. And that's some of the things that I found out in the PLI publications. It helps you to work smart because someone else has already done the hard work.
Right.
And it's important to utilize those resources that are available and not think that, well, it would help if I just do it on my own. No, it would help if I borrowed from somebody else.
Right. And learned from them, like commentaries. You don't have to start from scratch.
No. You learn from others. So, and there's just so much material that's out there.
Yeah.
That PLI produces, other publishers produce. That it's like, come on, you. And I learned in law firms that the quicker you get your answer, the better. Years ago, when someone would ask a reference question, I learned you ask them 3 questions: fast, good, cheap.
Right. I remember that.
And we'd always say, take
Choose
two of the 3.
3.
Because if it was fast and good, it wasn't going to be cheap. Now, if you ask that question, yes, I want all 3. And that's when it comes, all right, being a librarian, what resources that I know are out there? Who do I know is reputable? Where can I go to? It's like, if I go to X publication, I know some of the security stuff. PLI they're gonna have it. So let me check there. Let me check there for corporate stuff. You just say, hey, that's a good starting point because they want it fast. And especially in a law firm, even though DOJ is not a law firm, I always say we are the largest law firm in the world. Unfortunately, we have only one client and he's exceptionally cheap. So you have to be creative and smart to stretch those resources because, unfortunately, in the government, it's not like, oh, okay, well, we'll just up our billing rate and kind of recover. No, this cheap uncle we work for, his purse strings are severely limited.
Right. Finite. Well, you've touched on one thing I was going to ask about. I'm going to ask about trends within legal research from your patrons and for your patrons, but you've touched on one of them already. We've got many more resources, many faster resources than we did when we started out. No, I started with Matthew Bender in 1989, so I'm almost, I think I might be a little bit behind you, but not by much. So what do you see as trends within legal research and the legal research that your patrons are doing, your internal patrons and also your external patrons?
The one trend that I see is that research has gotten more and more complex. And, I'll say my first law library job was in, I believe, 1985 at Whittier. And some of those questions were always legal. Fast forward 37, 38 years almost now. I can get a question on mental health. I could get a question on what the weather was a few years ago. I could get research on finding material from an expert witness that we're opposing counsel has proposed. There's just so many things. And I think as research has become more complex, we have to make sure that we use everything. I know people like to say, oh, just Google it. And I said, yeah, okay, fine. If you want a lot of junk, because Google will give you an answer, but as they say, it may not give you the right answer.
Right. It might be wrong.
And it has been.
Often.
There was a case that individual kept citing Wikipedia, and it's like, no.
Right. It's crowdsourced. You can't rely on that.
You can't rely on that. And so, one of the things I see is that research becomes more complex. I am just, kind of starting to think and look at AI and ChatGPT. I am not sure where we're going with that, but I know, 2023, that may be one thing, but 3 years down the line, it could be something exponentially greater. So I think we're having to become more nuanced in our research. But at the same time, be much more broader in what we have to research, what we have to look for.
No, you're right. It used to be much more straightforward. And now it's global.
Now it's global. And some of the things I know that our office does, like in our major frauds unit, looking at some of this financial stuff. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not an economist.
Right.
But when you're asked to research economic stuff, it's like, okay, I can do this. I learned. I'm a professional, but you have to use every resource that you've tapped into to do that. And it's gotten harder because I know what we see in our office. Criminals have gotten smarter and more complex,
Yeah, very sophisticated.
It's extremely sophisticated. It's not, the robbery now is not with a 38 that you go into the bank. It's with a pen and pencil that you go into a computer.
Right.
And, commit fraud and steal and create Ponzi schemes and all those horrible things that U.S. attorney offices deal with on a daily basis.
Right. Do you, and this is early days, like you said, with AI and ChatGPT, do you have thoughts on how that will affect the future of librarianship?
I hear so many people, about to sign the death notice for librarians with this coming up.
No, we've heard that before.
But yeah, I said, yeah, unfortunately, we've been a dying profession ever since I got in the profession, and I've got more work now than ever. Right. But I could be honest. I am not sure where we're going with that. How librarians, it's still new, and there's an old English show that my wife and I like to watch. We've even gone to Highclere Castle with the show when we were in England several years ago. And there's one episode that they got electricity in the house, and all of a sudden the lights come on, and it was like, oh, I can't believe. And now it's like we can't do without artificial light.
Right.
And that's where I think we're having to look and embrace. Right now, it's scary because it's the unknown. But, we have been in this situation before, and we have managed to. The one thing I am glad about being a librarian is that we have managed to morph into other areas, other disciplines, and we've had to change because the times have changed, the situations have changed. They finally moved it, but at the LA Law Library, they used to have still the old card catalog that was there. And I remember, having to go to the catalog and searching to see where it was, writing down where the call number was, and then going in the stacks and finding it. And, it's like, ooh, back then that was high tech.
That was high tech. That was state of the art.
It was, I remember when they actually got a computer in the library. I remember at the law school, it was this dot matrix printer that was on and we just thought, ooh, that's so, when I'm going to date myself again, when I was in college, IBM had a typewriter, IBM Selectric 75.
Selectric, red or green, maybe, about this size.
Yeah, but I remember it had you could do I was doing my papers, and it had enough for 15 pages of memory, because I was a horrible speller. And so I'd have to print it off and check it and then go back. And, now it's like, are you kidding me?
Right.
But as technology has advanced, as we have moved in other areas, we've just kept up with it. So what, AI may bring, I'm not sure. But one thing I am 1,000% sure of is that we'll be able to manage it. We'll be able to work in it and with it. And I'm sure in a few years, people will be coming to the librarian asking a question, how do we use this?
Right.
How do we use this?
I think you're right. And you've touched on it already. It's like you're anticipating what I'm going to ask you. But how's the use of legal research materials changed over the years that you've seen? And again, you've touched on it already. We've got more electronic choices now.
Every time I walk out my office into the library, I just wow, 2 years ago, I had so much more space. And in these years, I have gone through, first they took part of the space to build a conference room on the floor. And so I said, well, that's easy because my reporters, I had federal reporter, Feds, Supreme Court, bye. Then they took more. So then it's okay, what else can go?
Right, digests and things like that, shepherds.
I think all of ours, it's the space has shrunk. But because more and more things are available electronically that are safe to use, we have access to those. Those contracts that we have with the publishers and all that allow us access to things that, I know back in the day when somebody took the Fed reporter that you needed, well, we had a speaker system. And sometimes
you tracked it down.
I need the book because I have to attach it to a brief, and they won't take the Westlaw copy.
Right.
But it's those things that you turn and you have to anticipate, and you just see, okay, how can you find this? And it's more than just, like I said, more than just going to Google. You'll start to use some of the specialized databases from the particular publishers. You'll use, and sometimes I would tell you, I picked up the phone and I've called up a librarian friend, and it's like, okay, I'm stumped. Help me.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Help me.
Because there's this collective knowledge.
There is collective knowledge. I always say, don't pretend you're the smartest person in the room, but be the smartest person in the room that knows how to reach out to somebody who's smarter in a bigger room.
Or in a different area.
Yes. Go there. It's like, hey, you don't have to tell your patron how you got the answer. But I always say, listen, I have high friends in low places.
I like that.
So I use everybody.
Right. And that may lead nicely to AALL. It's an association you've worked with and within for a long time. What made you get involved? Because there are lots of librarians who don't. They go to the conference or they don't go to the conference. They don't serve on committees. They don't do other stuff. What made you move to get involved there? And
I'm a glutton for punishment. I will tell you, the first thing I ever did, I joined the association back in 1992 because our annual meeting was in San Francisco that year. And I was with Orrick Harrington, and that was our home office. And the librarian there, the head librarian for the firm, wanted everyone to come to San Francisco for the conference And then we could meet as part of the library team there in San Francisco. That's literally the only reason I came, the only reason I joined, because Org paid the bill. So I stayed. And in 1998, the annual meeting was in Anaheim.
Yes.
And I love a good party. And I was in charge of the closing banquet that year. And that was so much fun. Now, I'd worked in my local chapter, SCAL,
Right.
for years, been on a committee here and there, and, just enjoyed it. But I did the closing banquet, and I just kept active. And then I got on someone asked me after the closing banquet to be on another committee, and I was on another one and another one. And then you do, and it's like, I enjoyed it. Because one of the things I said is that, like I said, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I know enough to hang around people who know more than I do. And my work with AALL committee work helped me learn, because I learned from my colleagues. And so finally I was nominated for a board seat, and I won in 2006, I think it was. And being on committees, doing work. And, people always say, oh, I don't have the time. Well, I always say, you have to make the time. It's not a big commitment. It's not, incoming vice president, president, that's going to be a little more time commitment.
Right. It already is.
For most committee work that we do and just being well, it's not a great amount of time. All of us, I think we could spare a couple of hours in the month if we need to. But you gain so much more by working. And so, and I was there, did the work, and then somebody saw what I did. And, for several years, I was a speaker at Cornell during AALL.
Yes, the new law librarians.
For new librarians. And one of the things that I would always tell them was, you need to meet 5 new people every day, because librarians have a tendency to silo, and you stay with your colleagues at your firm or your law school. I said, no. You need to go and meet 5 new people. And just meeting 5 new people. Now you meet more than that. I'll admit I'm not shy and quiet. But you meet more than 5, and you realize the wealth of knowledge in your colleagues and what they offer. That, librarians are some of the most gracious people. We will freely give you
whatever you need, whatever we can.
And that's just our nature. And, and so I started doing that, and I just, like I said, worked on the board, and then I was nominated and won that. Right. And then president, I said, okay, well, all right.
All right. If you
I'll
insist.
try.
If you insist. Well, you and I met via email when you were treasurer, and then we met in person last summer in Denver. But I was in charge of the PLLIP awards committee. I was chairing that. And so we give prizes to the winners, and I wrote you for, I think, reimbursement. Anyway, so that's when I met you for treasurer. But what do you want to accomplish while you're president? I was explaining to Daniel a few minutes ago, it's a 3-year term. You're a VP president-elect, and then you're president, and then you're past president. So you've got 3 years. I mean, you've already had a lot of years to shape the organization, but you've got 3 years from sort of the top level. What goals do you have for your time as the top level?
The one thing I will say, I want to make sure when my term is over that the association is in a better condition than when I started. I don't mean that it's bad now. No. But, we are the premier association for providing resources and support to law librarians. And that is always my goal, whether I was treasurer or a board member, is what resources are we providing for librarians that will help them in their jobs, in their organizations, in their employers, in their employment locations. And that's really that's big picture. I want to make sure that AALL is left as strong and even stronger, and that we support our members. Dealing as my 3-year term as treasurer, I think it's most important that we have a strong financial condition. I would tell you, if someone had told me in 2019 when I became treasurer what we were going to go through, I would have told him, thanks, but no thanks.
Right.
Because it was a rough,
yes,
it was a rough 3 years.
A very difficult time.
But, you know, the thing is that working together, working with not only as a board, but with the membership and with the headquarters staff, we have worked hard to make the association available and, how should I put it, really supportive. And really that, if I could say, flash forward to 2026, it's like, you know, you did good.
Right.
You did good. You know, our strategic plan, we implemented our strategic plan. We helped to advance legal professionals, and they helped to gain access to like pro se litigants. And, you know, because as we see, the law is so complex. And if someone doesn't know their rights or don't know how to access their rights, I think that's a detriment for our society as a whole.
Absolutely. How can they go after it if they don't know
if you
what's
don't
out
know
there?
And sometimes, you know, I mean, my library is not open to the public, but I get calls all the time. And fortunately, the LA Law Library, which is, you know, in close proximity here, I said, listen, here's the number for the LA Law Library. They can help you answer the question on where you may need to file, or what does 8 USC 1226 say? You know, I can look it up and I can read it to you. I could send you a link. But I mean, I can't do that because I'm not a resource for that. Right. But let me tell you someone who can help you. And that helps them, you know.
It's the next link that they needed.
The next link, yeah. It helps them, you know, to utilize those rights and privileges that they have here in this country. I think that's important as law librarians. Our association touches everything from corporate to academic to law firms to law schools to government entities. I mean, it's really anyone that touches the law, we have a member there. And you know, but and each of those different areas have different needs. And so we're the kind of a catch-all to help you do
whatever it is. We've got somebody. And there's a program, or there's, you know, some of the things that AALL has done these last few years. You know, we've had to kind of shift in certain areas just like everyone else has. Right. And adapt and evolve. And we have.
Yes. Like those webinars that we have, the coffee chats that are done. You know,
the online training.
Many of those things, they're free to the membership.
Right.
And my hope is that in these next few years that I think people know, but then you kind of forget. There's a whole lot that's out there. And sometimes if you have a question of, I'd like to find out more about X, you know, we can create something that, you know, in years past, we had to go to the annual meeting for those kind of classes, but now we don't have to.
Right. I was going to ask what you think is the most important lesson that you've learned over the course of your career.
Ooh.
And it could be more than one.
Ooh, what's the most important lesson? I will say when I was at Munger, they had a phrase that was drilled in to the attorneys. And that was, the most important source of new business is the work that's currently on your desk. And no, I don't generate new business, but I'll say the most important thing you're doing is what's currently on your desk, because it creates goodwill. It creates a confidence that, as librarian, I had a research project on something last week that went into this week. And I had to tell the attorney, I did not find anything on this. And his response was not, well, go back and try harder. But it was like, okay, Cornell, I trust you.
Right. That's the answer.
Yeah. It's like sometimes the answer is it's not there. When someone gives me a question, back to the good, fast, cheap, I always try to do it fast. And some things are easy. Because I've worked in it so much, it's just second nature. They don't know it. And I keep thinking, why don't you just pull it? Because they don't know.
Right.
But what it does, it helps the librarian shine. And I think it's important, that when we do something for someone that they just find amazing, my response better not be, oh, that was nothing.
Right.
No, you know what? That's experience, that's training. And especially when I've had to get things from other librarians, I said, that comes being connected with people outside this organization.
Right.
That helps. And that's what I've learned. Do the work that's on your desk as best you can, as efficiently as you can. I found out that people really, they appreciate it. They appreciate it.
Yes. Where I thought you were going a minute ago was some things are quick and easy for us, but we don't need to tell them that. We don't need to say, oh, that old thing, I do that all the time. I have a good friend who was a library director in Philadelphia in a firm, and now she's retired. But she said, the attorneys would come with really hard questions, really involved, really complicated questions that would take her people a long time. And so they would say, when they got the answer, they would say thank you. And she would not let her staff say, oh, no problem, happy to do it. She would have them say, if it was a challenge, she would say, we enjoy the challenge, just to make it clear what's involved. It's not just easy.
Usually my response is, so you tried to play Stump the Librarian. Yeah, lost.
Right.
Cause answer. They usually get a chuckle, but it reinforces that this wasn't easy.
Exactly.
This wasn't easy. And, when you're keeping up, I always like to keep up when a patron asks me something, especially if it's sometimes you get a question that they think, oh, you could just find this in 10 minutes.
Right. But
it really is going to take you 10 hours. Yep. But, and other things that they think is 10 minutes, but I always keep you up to say, this is proving a little difficult. I'm still working on it.
Right.
So don't panic. And it's like, okay, I appreciate it. Thanks. Send that email. If you see them in the hallway, do that talk and
keep them up to date.
Yeah.
Right. What do you wish you had known, or what piece of advice do you wish you had received at the beginning of your career?
Don't stress out over the little things. That's why I don't have any hair now. I rubbed it all off. I rubbed between that and the children. They just left it. I tell people now, when they come to me in a panic and oh my, they're stressed out. And I understand. I'm working with attorneys, they get stressed out for a variety of reasons. And I will say, hold on. Is anybody going to die? No. Anybody going to be maimed? No. I said, okay, you know what? We're going to work through this, right? This is not going to be a cause of death. You may think you're going to die, but you're not going to die. This is not going to be the cause of somebody losing their life. My first job, it helped me to do this, was my first job, like I said, was at the library at Harbor-UCLA Medical Center, county hospital. And literally, we would have individuals, surgeons, I remember several times, come into the library and say, I need, the particular book on thoracic surgery or something. Why? Because somebody was on the table and you needed an answer.
Right, some guidance.
That was a life and death. What we're dealing with when you come in, no, nobody's going to die. We're going to settle this. So you know what? Don't sweat this little stuff. Take a deep breath. Calm down. I keep on my desk 2 things, a jar of candy and tissues. So if you're about to be in tears, here's the tissue. Here, get you some sugar. Suck on the candy. Suck on the peppermint. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. Don't sweat the little stuff.
And that may be the same answer. I was just going to ask, the advice you'd give to someone starting out in their career and what you wish you'd known, same idea. Just concentrate, on the important things.
Concentrate on the important things. But I always tell librarians, starting off, learn this early. Stay connected to your colleagues. Stay connected to your colleagues. Whether you are a member of a local chapter or the National Association, stay connected to your colleagues because number one, they're going to keep you grounded. because there have been some times, I think all of us in our jobs, we have started to write the resignation letter, or you've gotten upset. There's a good friend of mine. We started at Munger around the same time, and we've been friends since then. There have been times that someone has pushed my button, and I have started to write the email, and I've written the email or I've written the response, especially in those early days of these things that, people can put out. And I always send it to my friend really for grammar and style. And there have been several times that I said, I need your eyes. That usually when I send something, that's the line.
The subject line.
I need your eyes. And this is what I wrote. And more than once, she's called me up and she says, step away from the computer. We're going to lunch, And I'm like, Melissa, I'm not hungry. Step away. You are going to meet me for lunch. Come out right now. And it's like, she talks me off the ledge.
Right.
And it's like, it's okay. It's like, okay, you wrote the email. You are not going to send that email.
Right.
And you need, if you're starting out young, stay connected. Don't sweat the little stuff, but stay connected to your colleagues who know what you're going through, that can understand what you do, and they can help walk you through.
They can provide perspective. I write those emails too, but I send them to my friend and get her to talk me down, or no, you can't send that. You can't send that. You need to edit that seriously. Well, I was going to ask about the most important learnings you would share with law librarians, but you've been sharing them all along, and I've been taking notes. You've noticed that. What's the most important personality trait or strength that someone would need to be successful in your job? 10, 15 years from now when you may retire and they need somebody else to do this job.
Oh, I better retire before that. I would just say, you're going to need a little tougher skin. You're going to have to toughen up. Don't take everything personal. Working with attorneys, they can be high strung. You don't need to be high strung too. That's just too much anxiety in the room. Listen, I always tell folks, listen, go get you some ice cream and go sit on the couch. You'll be fine. Just bring it down. Take it down a notch. And that, I'll say, toughen up. They're really not mad at you. They're mad at the situation. You just happen to be the face that they can look at right now.
Right.
And so just like, don't take it personal. Don't get mad, and I have to still learn that because I still have to work through that. I always say we're on the same team. You don't let a person be abusive. I don't mean that. But, it's like, all right, it's going to be okay. I go back to, if you're not going to die, if you're not going to be maimed, we're going to get through this. It's a whole lot easier to do.
Thank you. We're going to move on to talking about books in a second, but is there anything else that I haven't asked?
No, I can't think of anything other than I thank my wife for being the supportive one in the group.
There we go. Thank you. What are you reading these days?
I happen to like biographies. And so there are a couple of biographies that I'm gonna start. One of the things I'm reading is Prince Harry's The Spare. British family has always been intriguing to me. So that's one of the things.
And he's practically a neighbor there in Southern California.
Yes, he's up in Santa Barbara. I said I'm going to go up one weekend and just go around Montecito and see, hey, Harry, how you doing?
Anything you'd recommend people read?
My tastes are so much different. One of the things, though, I have been going back to is, when we're in high school and college, you had to read some of the classics. And back then, it was for a class. You had a test, you had a paper.
Right.
And some of those books that I read that I enjoyed back then, I said, I'm going back to reread those. Now that you have 40 plus years of experience, Catcher in the Rye reads a whole lot differently.
Right.
Some of the John Steinbeck books read a whole lot different as an adult as they did that when you were in high school and college.
Yeah, when we were kids. Wonderful. Well, this has been just a delight, and I appreciate your candor, and I appreciate your time with us. Anything else you want to share here toward the end?
Next week I'm doing a presentation for Double Up on how to speak. Look up, speak up, and watch them follow. And, I love librarians, but some of us are the worst presenters. We read, we don't look up, we don't, sometimes you have to read the room. And sometimes we're like, no, this is my presentation and I am going to read my presentation to everybody until I get through. Thank you.
It's true. It's true. And so that's something valuable to teach. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for your candor and our connection.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to The Practicing Law Librarian, part of PLI's Ever Current podcast. Be sure to subscribe and listen to our latest episodes wherever you listen to podcasts. And to learn more about the Practicing Law Institute, please visit pli.edu. To learn more about PLI Plus, which provides electronic access to the full collection of PLI Press publications, and schedule a demo with a member of our team, please visit pli.edu/plus. Please note that the views and opinions expressed during this podcast represent those of the individuals being interviewed and not necessarily those of PLI.